Sort of hard to know what to do with a week in which there are 2 4th of July weekends, because it falls smack dab in the middle. And initially I thought, well, I'm just going to do the 4th of July thing next week. But as it happens, you have this marvelous reading from Galatians about freedom, so how could I resist? So let's talk a little bit about freedom. A number of years ago, it would have been in my second call, which means it was a number of years ago, I was taking a youth trip to Antietam. Now, Antietam, as you probably know, is the place in which the most devastating single-day casualties of the Civil War took place. And each year, what they do is they put out a candle for everyone who died there, a luminaria. And so our church youth group went to take an acre or acre and a half, maybe 2, to fill the luminaria with the sand and the candles, and you lay them out, so that the whole battlefield basically is covered, and it's an astounding sight as it gets dark. Some 23,000 luminaria, and it's just hill after hill, acre after acre of these lights. As part of processing what we were doing, I asked the group, so what do you think these people died for? And their first answer was freedom. That's what we often say every time there's a war. When someone dies, they die for freedom, right? They die for freedom. Well, I said, I wonder, do you think that those young Southern men, don't you think that they were fighting for freedom too? And I think very much they would have put it in those terms. So then the question becomes, what is freedom about? The South was fighting for the freedom to continue to keep slaves. And the North, they had mixed motives. Let's just be... I'm not even going to get into that, but the fact of the matter is that freedom can mean a variety of things. If I were to ask you what it means to be free, what would you say? To choose what you want to do. What else? Not be constrained to do what you don't want to do. When the makers of our Constitution came up, we know that we're about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Liberty is a synonym for freedom, right? But in the Constitution, the preamble says that what the founders were doing was in order to found a more perfect union. So there is something about freedom that is not just so everybody can do whatever the heck they want to do. There is something about freedom that invites us into community in a fuller and richer way. And that, my friends, is what Paul is talking about. For sure, that is what he's talking about. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to the yoke of slavery. For Paul, the yoke of slavery is 2 things. It is the yoke of sin. It's the yoke of self-centeredness, of selfishness. And it's also the yoke of the law, which leads us sometimes to just sort of keep a ledger and only do the minimal. And what Paul goes on to say is that we have been freed so that we can live in loving service to each other. There you go. It's that simple. We have been freed to be loving We have been freed so that we are not wrapped up in ourselves and can be for other people. Can be for other people. Sometimes I think we forget that. We think that our liberty is so that we can be our own person. No. We are liberated so that we can be the person God dreams us to be, which is a very different thing. Whenever self-interest reigns, and when we cannot put aside our selfishness, the community tears apart. It tears apart with constant nagging and carping. It tears apart because resources aren't shared fairly. It tears apart because people are used and abused. It tears apart. This freedom that Christ invites us to in the kingdom of God, this is about the kingdom of God and God's vision of community, is huge. And it's urgent. It's urgent. When Jesus in today's gospel is marching on toward Jerusalem, and what he is about to do is to contrast God's view of community with the powers that be's view of community, with that of the Roman Empire and that of the religious authorities. Real community looks like this. The kingdom of God looks like love. The kingdom of God looks like care. The kingdom of God looks like sharing, and all of this freely done, because that's what God does for us. The kingdom of Caesar, well, that's a different thing indeed. So here we are working on the community of God, the kingdom of God, and Jesus is going to Jerusalem, and he says, y'all, this is important. This is important. It is urgent. A number of years ago, one of the women who is actually on the slate for bishop of this diocese, who is an evangelical Christian, and she may have moved since then. She and I were having a discussion. She was a church planner at the time, and she said, you know what your problem is? I said, no, what is my problem? I have a number of them, really. And she says, you liberal Christians, ouch, you liberal Christians, because you don't believe in traditional heaven and hell, and you believe that God is going to save everyone, you have no urgency. Me, I think there are souls at risk. Souls that will die. Well, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and here's what I gotta say. There is urgency, and the urgency is because there are lives in the balance. How we construct our communities means the difference of life and death. Now, there are people in poverty who are going hungry. They will starve. There are people who are struggling because they have no hope, because they don't feel in community, they don't feel loved, and the way we are for them makes a difference. Now. There are lives in the balance. And Jesus says it's urgent that we respond. That we respond now rather than later. And that we be focused on this. We be focused on the kind of community God is inviting us to create. We sometimes lose our focus, I'm saying. We lose our focus over the words that we use in worship. We lose our focus over fears and politics. We lose our focus and we look up and we say, those people, what they're doing, they make me so mad. Well, Jesus says, don't bother with that. Follow me. Follow me. We have more important things to do. We are called to liberty. Liberty that creates community. Liberty that serves each other in love. Liberty and freedom that put away our selfish desires and yearns for a more perfect union. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to the yoke of slavery.